So,
Oh, hey, there's Donna. Are you gonna come sit with us? Yeah. You don't like us anymore, huh? Is that what it is?
Where's your family?
and Angie, man, this chair's really firm. Angie Davidson,
Who's going to get?
Angie Newsom said they
Mom,
wanted to do
Dad, for what?
You can go down, South
Okay,
Duval
that's what,
and then go across and then back up like Angel, but you can't go.
is that,
south
is it
north like
boys
you
or girls?
can. Right now, I don't know, it'll be open again.
You know, years ago,
They
these had the NAI,
like staying at the bottom of the canyon.
that was pretty awesome, when they used to do that.
Randy and Tracy Stewart did it.
You never seen so many tall girls in your life.
That would be fun.
Even Susie's your girlfriend
I've
says,
been reading a lot of
hey, that's some tall girls.
I don't know how you were trained for that around here. You know, like, you don't have any idea what's really going on. I should be one of those that you go and has to leave out on the journey.
Go in and damn stores and they have you.
Yeah, you're right. But we went, we were at the point at sunset, we were right there to the and the sunset.
Where's your office? Where do you actually work for?
We did what? Oh, yeah, that's
You know, which one did you go?
We had to go down a ladder.
I was the manager of the.
I don't know, is that one like that too?
Couple years.
And one like X. Oh, I saw that one too, what it goes about. But I didn't see the choice.
2005 to 2007. Just 20 years. It's hard to believe.
It was? Yeah, I wasn't that way. I mean, we made it to Devil's Bridge in Savannah. When we got there, it was like 100 people like to go out and get their picture made. So we got a picture made like on the inside of the bridge, we didn't actually go out on it because we wanted to. I wasn't sure I really wanted to walk on the first of all. I'm sure it was wide once you got out there, but when I saw it, I was like,
Yeah, what a bill.
Yeah, we ran.
TPA 26 years.
it's gnarly.
Then I was a general manager in Lexington for a couple of years. In Southwest. Euphrates.
Right, yeah, we did it.
I was there as a district manager for 3 years.
There was some rocks around, well, it
Yeah.
Possibly lead vice
That was
president.
training on Devil's Bridge too, and,
it's like, we've come this far.
right, right. Live or die, we're here.
What's wrong? 2 months ago.
But
He ended up with good
David was with him, but when
He does
we
TVA.
had more time in elevation.
My uncle was at, distance is not a problem, but the
Oh,
elevation
good.
changes.
Yeah, I know. It's like,
Had a
I don't feel like I did. A long time ago, when I got the National Guard, right out of college. Steve,
Put pressure to go faster, right?
A lot of people, if
I
you
don't
come
know,
out,
I don't know, let's go ahead of it.
And Steve built.
you know, Steve's from,
The way we went,
I mean, you had, especially y'all learned in Montana what
And
can
they look a whole lot
yeah.
alike.
So, when we
They
went
look
across,
alike.
the Highline Trail right there, the first thing that goes to the little road, that's
I think you would feel
everybody
it
talks
before.
about.
I think it's still
Part of there, that's how parachute, middle of that rail. You will be.
What's the only,
Of course,
Philip,
they,
Steve,
they're really like
wants to know.
running their hand
Yes,
on.
if
I
somewhere in the garden.
Yeah. You go across that
And
food?
then the
Yeah.
other one lives
I
in
said, can you take your hand off
The
that?
day we had the,
David walked in front of me, and I just,
all coming over canal. So we had the canal project, and they crossed. We're in, said, where's, yeah, the brother that, you'll go to visit. And so, he said, it's Arrington. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I showed him at Arrington, we're just in the cars department, you know? And I'm like, it was too late. But I didn't go and fix it.
I
didn't
know.
know you don't remind me.
And awarded.
You're like, well, they ain't gonna be here for that.
But I
What
apologize
call
for
you
that.
on for? I didn't know we were going to call Rock. Pretty big rock.
I always wondered why that doesn't happen.
And it was right there on the rock, where the rail and everything was. We thought
Did
it
I
was
tell you
fixed.
about the hailstorm we got caught in?
Okay, since we got quiet, we'll start. Thanks for being here. We've waited that script for 10 minutes, to allow people to get here. I forgot to do this last week, so I'm gonna get this out of the way first. 2 or 3 weeks ago, Glenn divided the class up in groups, and you all wrote letters to ministers. Remember that? Some of you were here. Well, somebody suggested, well, let's do something for the staff. So instead of dividing up in groups, I thought it might be a little easier if I just pass some cards around. Like this one says Eve Klaus works in the office, Sherry Brooks and Stephanie Brower. Yeah, you want to call her by her maiden name. Just write them a note, thank them, sign your name, make it, and we'll get them to them. It just says, just to say thank you, because they do a whole lot of work for us. I'll start these in different places, so you don't have to keep up with all 3 cards at once. Just get it back to me at the end of class. You better say something nice about Eve, because her husband's here, so.
Do I have to say it?
You can deal with that on your, you can sign last, is that okay? We're in Titus chapter 2. Hopefully, Glenn is gone for the 3rd week, so you have had to put up with me. Maybe he will take a few weeks now and get us caught up and back on track with some other things. 2 weeks from today, I'm going to have sinus surgery, so I'm really hoping that he'll be here for that one, if nothing else. But let's back up and review a little bit. Remember, Timothy and Titus are both, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus are letters written to young evangelists by Paul, basically telling them how to conduct things in churches. It's kind of like a church manual, okay? He tells them some of the problems they're going to have to deal with. He tells Timothy, don't let anyone despise your youth. I mean, if you're a young guy, but you're going to have to be a leader, and so you may be leading people who are much older than you. You may be, there may be men who become elders, they're older than you, but you're still teaching and leading in that situation. And different for elders. Once you appoint elders, and both evangelists were to appoint elders where they were. But you may find yourself in the early going, leading people who are older than you. So we have that backdrop of what he's talking to them about Timothy and Titus. Timothy was in Ephesus, Titus is on Crete. Crete was a much more difficult place to work maybe than Ephesus. Ephesus had its challenges, but Crete, the Cretans were, it was like the Wild West of the ancient Near East. These people were compulsive liars, a lot of them, cheats, sexual ethics were out the window in a lot of ways. It was a very immoral place to live. And that kind of comes out in our section tonight. Some of the things that Paul tells Timothy to teach have to do, he mentions self-control over and over again in this chapter. So that seems that was a pervasive problem. And some of the moral issues, he talks about being respectable and honorable and all these things. Maybe that was because on Crete, that was a special problem. So we talked about in chapter 1, we had a week that we talked mostly about the appointment of elders, the qualifications for elders, because that's the first half of chapter 1. The second half of chapter 1 is about false teachers, people who were coming in. It seemed like this was a problem in Ephesus and on Crete, that there were people coming in that were teaching things which were not sound. The word sound is kind of a buzzword in our brotherhood of the last 100 years. It's generally defined very narrowly, but really what it means is just healthy doctrine, healthy things. And these people were not teaching those things that were healthy. And so when we get to chapter 2, Paul sort of turns, makes a pivot when he says in verse 1, you, however, where did I go? You, however, must teach what is appropriate to sound doctrine. And he divides up different groups to talk to: older men, older women, young men, bondservants. And then he has a section where he talks about how Titus is to behave himself. And then he ends the chapter by talking about the grace that forms the foundation. You know, it's one thing to tell people they need to live right, but it's another thing to give them the motivation for living right. And that motivation is not guilt, it's not browbeating, it's not arm twisting, but it's grace. Realizing what God has done for us is a motivating factor. And so he's going to talk about grace in the last few verses. Now, what I put up here on the board is in the NIV's rendering of the first part of verse 15. He sums it up. These are the things that you should teach. And that's pretty handy for Titus, because he's now got an outline of the things he needs to teach among the churches on the island of Crete. So, there we are. There's the two sections of chapter 1, and the instructions to specific groups, and then the basis for Christian living, which is grace. Can I get a volunteer to read just the first 5 verses of chapter 2? Somebody do that for me? Okay, fine.
But as for you, teach what accords with sound doctrine. Older men are to be sober-minded, dignified, self-controlled, sound in faith, in love, and in steadfastness. Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good. And so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled.
All right, that's a lot in those 5 verses. And there's some challenging sections in there, things that cause us difficulty in the modern world, because maybe the role of women in the first century may not be what it is in the 21st century. And so we can talk about that a little bit. We'll be glad to talk. Any questions you all have, anything you want to talk about when we get down to that part. But he has these groups that he tells Titus they need to teach. And this word is going to show up a few times, this teach this and train this and encourage this. It's basically the same word. And it's not just teaching like I'm doing tonight. So we get all the young women in a classroom and we have some older woman who stands up in front and teaches them. Well, that's one way it could happen. But it's also a broader word than that. It has to do with training and encouraging and even the idea of urging. And so it's more than just teach. It's also interesting that Paul tells Titus, you teach the older men this, and the older women this, and the younger men this. But when it comes to the younger women, he tells the older women to teach the younger women. It's kind of interesting that maybe he took that responsibility off Titus, or maybe he just realized, as Donna and I were talking about this, that it's just one of those things where Titus can't tell young women how to love their husbands, love their children, and the other things that are there. I mean, it's not in his wheelhouse. I don't know if Titus was married. We don't have any record of that. At least I haven't run across it, or whether he had children himself. But, it's some things are better taught from older women to younger women, right? And we want to talk about that. We want to talk about mentoring, the mentoring that should go on in churches, intergenerational stuff. I'm looking at you because I know that's a special interest of yours. So maybe the first question would be this. He says, this is what you're to teach the older men. Who's an older man? All right? Everybody else is looking around at somebody else who's an older man, right? An older man is 10 years older than me, right?
It just depends on who was on the roll.
Who was what?
It just depends on who was on the roll that day.
Okay.
Who was the oldest man they had? Who was the youngest man they had? There's a certain, I suppose that's something that I do talk about on a regular basis, is what defines old? What does old mean?
Old is not a number? Is an old a number?
Well, do you think it is?
I don't know.
That's
I'm
what I
asking-
thought.
I'm asking you. This is almost 70, I'm talking to 25,
24.
24, sorry.
But old is an adjective. It's not finite. It's not intensely descriptive. When you say old, we know what old means to us, but old to me and old to you might be two different olds,
I can tell you it probably is.
probably.
When you talk to a teenager, anybody young, there's only two ages, younger than them and older than them. That's the only thing it's the only
That's
thing
a
they
bit ageist, but okay.
Are they going off of the age of, like, how old you are, or is it, like, how old you are in faith?
Okay, yeah. You know, when Timothy, Paul talks to Timothy about appointing elders, he says, not a novice, not somebody who, not only, he uses the word presbyter, the word that we get Presbyterian from, or presby, you know, that eye condition, presbyopia, you know, when your eyes get old, is that word, when he talks about elders. But he also says not a novice, so you can have a 70-year-old who's new in the faith, might not be qualified to be an elder. But when he says older men, he's using the same word that he uses in chapter 1 and in 1 Timothy chapter 3 about the qualifications of an elder. So, how old should an elder be? Yeah.
I'll answer that, but I was still dealing with the old question.
Oh, okay.
So the typical life expectancy in the 2nd century was 25 to 30. And so old was usually considered over 40.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, and I think that's different in different cultures. Because in the Jewish culture, you were still considered a young man till you hit 40. When Paul tells Timothy, don't let anyone despise your youth, generally they think that means Timothy can be up to the age of 40. How old, you know, translating into our context, how old do you expect your elders to be? We have an elder who's in his 40s, and we have elders who are in their 70s. I don't think anybody's in their 80s yet. So,
I said almost.
I would like the elders to be old enough to know better.
okay. You know, and some men are probably ready to become an elder at a younger age. Kelly Inouye, he's not here in the class tonight. Kelly has been an elder twice, and his first run was about 17 years, and I think he started in his early 40s, if I'm not mistaken. Now, and my son is 42, and I'm wondering, no, he's not. They don't have children that ages you in certain ways to have that kind of an experience. He doesn't have it. But I just can't picture that. So, you know, generally in our congregation, what, 50s, 60s? Okay. Well, and as Dave points out, life expectancy might have been quite a bit different in that period of time. So, maybe we're back to Kayla's point, it's relative. Who were the older ones, who were the more experienced ones. But there is a point, okay, maybe this is an illustration I can use, and this is back when I worked with college students, all right? And college students come in as freshmen, and they're very much, what's in it for them, right? What can they get from the group? What are the services that can be offered them? And there's a shift that has to happen in a college age church group, basically what we're talking about, because some of the older ones need to shift their mindset to providing what the younger ones need. You know, you have to turn from a taker to a giver. And I think that what we're talking about here is we don't know what they meant by young, we don't know what they meant by old, but there's a point at which in your life, you ought to stop thinking about just yourself and think about passing knowledge on to other people. Now, there's no reason that a 30-year-old young mother can't help a 22-year-old young mother with some of the same things we're talking about here. So it doesn't have to be a number, but more of a relationship. Now, some commentators think when he's talking about older men, he's talking about the elders of the church. And maybe not, but I don't see that it's necessarily just the elders. I think it's older men in general are to teach younger men. Older women in general teach younger women. Any other thoughts about when do you get old? I think last week sometime, right?
Well, I think that perhaps contemplating the question of when does one become old or not kind of puts us in left field regarding what the text is actually telling us. Because the intent is to say, those of you who know better, help the people who don't.
Yeah.
And old, I mean, we have to understand that old is a subjective concept. I mean, that's just a factual state. It's something that's relative to us. And we are all becoming increasingly older all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that does, we all also know that doesn't equate wisdom. That doesn't equate knowledge. And so I think to get lost in the weeds here would be a little bit beyond the point of what we're reading. I think it just is trying to encourage us that when you know, don't keep it to yourself. Like, you have a job, you have a purpose. And I think especially because of the way that our culture fixates on age and aging and utilizing the word old as a bad word, we like to take offense and we like to fixate on that word rather than just saying, oh, I've been around, I've seen some things, and now I know, and now I can share. It just doesn't have to be overly complex.
I would like to ask the question, Paul, why are you saying older? Why wouldn't we expect that of all men?
Yeah.
Why are you singling out them? And unless it's the older men, or I think Caleb was saying maybe to teach the younger men. But why did he single out older?
I think what is maybe the broader topic here is just mentoring. What we do to help people who are, I've used the analogy, it's kind of like you're walking up a long slope, the Christian life, and there are people who are in front of you, and there are people who are in back of you. You don't look at the ones in front of you and say, man, they're so much better than me, and you don't look at the ones behind you and say, what's wrong with them? We're just all on the same path. But if I'm farther along that path, I can help those people who are still coming along to know where the pitfalls are and where the rocks in the path are. And I think that that's what's incumbent upon us is don't keep it to yourself. Share with others.
I'm so sorry. You know, this is right on my hot topic list. So, I guess one thing that strikes me is we used to talk a lot about the sins of commission and the sins of omission. And so I don't know, I know nothing about how this applies to what was happening in Crete, right? When he wrote this. But what I do know is that it's a lot easier to see an older individual just back out and say, you know what, I'm willing to not. We've all heard, my children are grown. They don't need my help anymore. Or the one that I hear the most recently is they don't want my help.
Well,
And maybe they don't want the help. And it's really easy for us to get fixated on youth, like I was just saying. But perhaps it's the reminder to not let yourself out of the game.
we have a lot of people, they retire from work and also retire from the Christian life. Steve and I were just talking about that before, about when do you retire, you know? And, I'm retired and he's still working, that's his choice. I don't know if you're older than me or younger than me.
Just go,
Yeah, okay. But he owns his own company. But I don't ever expect to retire from Christianity, my Christian life. And there are people that do, they say, oh, let the young people handle it. That's the one I hear. Let the younger people handle it.
Lots of them don't realize that they have though.
They don't realize that they've checked out. I don't know. And if you checked out, I mean, you know, no, I'm not saying anybody's checked out. Y'all seem to be pretty active, right? Give me some hope.
I
Okay,
think a
but,
lot of times, Dave, it is a choice. I listen to a lot of books, and one of the books guy was talking to a much older guy, and he was like, you know, how do you stay so young? And he said, I just don't let the old guy in. And I think a lot of time that's a choice that people make. It's like, I am old, therefore I can't, versus, I still can do that. I still can help. I can, you know, so I think it's a mental.
well, and I think there's a responsibility with some of the younger people to seek the help of older people. I think that, you know, that's part of the sharing too, is let us know, you know, what can I help you with? You got 6 boys, I can't do anything.
Laundry, dishes.
Mental health counseling, yeah, right. I think it needs to be a two-way street, right? Helping one another. Any other thoughts about mentoring in the church? Do we have anything now going on now that we would call mentoring? No?
Well, I'm working on it.
Okay.
Well, the encourager group that the women have, typically the group is for older and for younger women.
How's that working?
I have one, I have a group, our group's someone.
Well, that's great, great. And the women are always better at this than the guys are. Always. Let me move on so we can get somewhere on this one. Where were we? Many of the words in this chapter, it's really interesting. They're only used in either this chapter or in Timothy and Titus. It's only words Paul uses with these guys. And I'm not going to go into the weeds to tell you about them, but it's really interesting. You want to, because one of the things when you're looking up a Greek word, you want to see how it's used in other places. Well, if it's only used here, you don't really have anything to compare with. So there's a lot of words like that in this chapter and in 1st and 2nd Timothy. Okay, let's talk about the older men. All right, that's the first group he talks about. He says they're supposed to be temperate. This word, it's a little hard to translate. Sober-minded, serious comes into play, clear-headed, self-control. This is the word that in one form or another shows up so much in this chapter. Every group is told to be self-controlled, I think, except the slaves. But I think what I see here is a real need on this particular culture for self-control because of what we said earlier about the nature of the Cretan culture as a whole. And I guess you probably could make it the same statement in our world today. Who doesn't need more self-control? It's just key. So you have saying the older men need to be. This is what Titus is supposed to teach and urge and encourage. Teach them to be temperate. Teach them to be worthy of respect. You know the verse in Philippians 4 where he says, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are honorable. Well, that's the same word as worthy of respect. It's the same Greek word in both places. So they're supposed to be of a character that when people look at them, they respect them. And this is a word that's used of elders in Titus 1 and 1 Timothy 3. This is what should describe our elders. They should be honorable. And he gives a definition of this under one of the other headings where he says, so that people would look at us and be our detractors, they don't have anything to talk about. So I'll pick on Terry. When I look at Terry Myers, I don't have anything that I can say, are you okay? I mean, you know, I don't see anything in Terry that I would need to say, hey, listen, you need to fix this, you need to work on this. Now, he might correct me and say, you know, you just don't know me, but and Jeff, I'm just looking at the other elders, and Dave, we need to be people who are honorable in our attitudes and our actions, and especially our elders are told to be honorable people, but this is told to be of older men in general. And so I can't help but think that Titus is dealing with a special circumstance on Crete that's probably a little more challenging morally than some places that in that part of the world at that time. They're told to be self-controlled, older men, curbing one's desires and impulses. They're told to be sound in faith. The word sound is the same word that was in the first verse, sound doctrine. Sound in faith just means healthy, having a healthy faith life, having a healthy love, healthy endurance, and with endurance is the concept of patience. So these are things, we might say, when we get the list and put it all together, it should be things that all Christians strive to be. Would you agree? So, if you don't have these in your life, how could somebody like Titus, or a teacher, or a preacher, or whatever, how could somebody help you have those qualities? What would the teaching that Titus would do, what form would it take with the older men? And remember, this could be a challenge for him because he's probably younger than these guys. So what do you think Titus could say or do or encourage or whatever to an older man to help him be one of these things? Yeah.
Just to lead by example. I mean, anybody can speak on what they're gonna do or what they should do. But it doesn't matter if you're younger or older, if you're not doing what you're saying should be done, nobody's gonna listen to it.
That's true. Yeah. He talks about the slaves in a minute and he's going to talk about how they should do this, this, and this so they can adorn the gospel, make the gospel more attractive. And the same thing can be said of all these groups. If they're not doing these things, then they're not making the gospel more attractive, they're making it less attractive. And all of us have dealt with that, where somebody comes along and you're trying to work with them, maybe encouraging them to come to church, and they say, well, I know this guy, he goes there, and he's terrible. And we all have dealt with that. So we're to strive to be the kind of people that make the gospel look more attractive, not less. Okay? Anything else about the older men that you want to brag on? I didn't mean to say that. Comment on?
I guess I consider myself an older man because when I think about and hear someone say, I listened to a book, my brain goes into a tailspin. Listen to a book. I'm picking on you, Jeff. You know, I mean, reading a book, okay, but in today's society, listening to a book. So I put myself in
you could have a Kindle and you have no pages, no paper in your hand, and you could be reading a book.
Yeah.
Technology has changed that whole thing. And I was talking to Steve beforehand, he was talking about things, like things that younger people, like Venmo, some people still write checks.
Never heard of it.
I forgot how to fill one out. You probably never have.
They made us take a test over it in high school, but I've never had a check.
In today's world, you don't have to have it. I mean, I can tell you lots of ways that I'm a dinosaur. I can tell you. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was talking about cardiologists and talking about how he learned to listen with a stethoscope, and now all of the technology is just advanced beyond. He talked about one of his teachers in med school was just horrified that younger doctors didn't know to listen to the heartbeat, to get the pitch and inflection and all the little ins and outs. And, he said one guy got up and was talking about a patient and said, how did you know there was a problem? I said, well, I heard a murmur, I did an echocardiogram, and the guy just, that's just not the way you do it. And I had a physics teacher in high school that wanted us to learn slide rule before we learned calculators. And I'm sure some of you don't have any idea what a slide rule is, but it was you do?
Well, certainly.
You still got one?
I got two of them.
Oh, really?
When I went to Freed Harbin and with engineering, you didn't have calculators, period.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say you had a slide rule and a calculator, you don't have one. And so you should
Well, I
slide
bought a
rule all the time.
calculator my junior year in high school, and it would add, subtract, multiply, and divide. It cost me $42. You know, and I was uptown.
That was big.
And when I used the calculator, I would work out the problem by hand to check to make sure the calculator was right.
Remember when Jacob Dowdy wanted to move everything to like digital check-in on your phone before you came to the building? And,
Before you press the
you know, he said, before, when you pull in the parking lot, you just check in on your phone, and they were like, we'll have
Well,
to teach
it's,
people.
yeah.
He was really nice.
And then, I guess the point is that older people can still teach younger people even if they don't understand their technology, right?
I think the thing to really realize is, this is a really complicated topic, because we all come to the table with perceptions of what old means. And no matter what perception we may have currently, having negative perceptions about aging is the only kind of discrimination that you grow into discriminating against your future self. And when you do that, you have this innate learned helplessness, which is why we see people back away from jobs in the church that we desperately need them willing to do, whether that's the same thing that they're used to doing or not. But God didn't ask us to always do the same job. He asked us to do the job that he called us to do. And looking down upon ourselves, making jokes about being old, being a dinosaur, all of those things just teaches us to be more discriminatory about our age and about other people. And so then we start separating ourselves. So really, we have been called, whether we're older or younger, to do the things that God asked us to do and to learn the things that God asked us to do. But we don't have to think about it as the old people of the church and the young people of the church. We're all just people in the church.
Right. And I think that's the point. We can all help each other. And of course Titus was told to teach the older men, so it's possible to teach people who are older than you.
And probably even needed sometimes.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about old women. Sorry, I went too far. This is what he says about the older women. They're to be reverent in behavior. The word reverent deals with something that's set apart for God. It's something sacred for God. Like the implements in the temple were set apart for God, right? They weren't for normal everyday use. They were set apart. So the behavior of the older women is to be reverent. Holy is another way to describe that. They're not to be slanderers. And this is an interesting word. In the Greek, it's diabolos. And it's like acting like the devil is slander, because the devil is a slanderer. That's what the word Satan or Satan means in the original, is slanderer. Someone who says, look at this guy, God, you think he's good, but look what he's doing, you know? He's slandering us to God. And so when you gossip about somebody else, when you accuse somebody of something that maybe they didn't do, or even if they did it, then you're guilty of of being a slanderer. And other verses tell us about women, especially, that were going from house to house, and they were idle and not doing what they were supposed to do. And you can get into some stereotypes there, but everybody is subject to, is susceptible to gossip. But this is a step beyond gossip. This is more like making a false accusation. Not enslaved to much wine. That's an interesting phrase that we picked up when we talked about elders. And they're supposed to be teaching what is good. So this is the older women, all right? Now, when Paul takes that and moves it to the next group, it becomes a little more interesting. Because what he's saying here is the older women are to teach the younger women. And this is what they're supposed to teach them. to be, and again, the word teach can be trained or taught or encouraged. Teach them how to love their husbands and children. I read that and I was thinking, maybe maybe a wife needs to be encouraged to love her husband when it's not easy to love her husband, but you have to tell a woman how to love her children? I just don't know what this is. Now, it hit me that in the first century, and on Crete, especially in the Greek culture, there was a lot of arranged marriages. So maybe there was a reason why an older woman might need to teach a younger woman, okay, you're stuck with this guy, or whatever, it may be in an arranged marriage, it was not more necessary for them to teach how to love their husbands. But what would an older woman need to teach a younger woman about her children? Maybe that's the broader question.
Well, if she's letting the child have everything he wants, and because she's showing him that she loves him, that's not an accurate understanding of love.
Okay.
So maybe discipline
And how would you go about doing that?
you have to have a relationship with her.
Well, you might talk about how you raised your children, assuming that your children are older than the ones.
And well behaved.
Huh?
And well behaved.
Well, yeah, hopefully. What else could an older woman teach a younger woman about her children? That would be beyond just teach her how to love her children.
Not all people have loving mothers. That, as much as we want to think that that's the case, not everyone comes from a loving home with a loving mother. And
Right.
so
It doesn't come naturally to some people.
it doesn't. And I mean, for those people who it does, that's great. But potentially it's not as easy as we might assume.
I think there's a lot of things that an older woman could teach younger women about children, about bringing them up in what Ephesians talks about, the nurture and admonition of the Lord, bringing them up in a Christian way. I think there's a lot of wisdom to impart. I know it was important to us to have some older couples who had raised their kids and done a good job, that we'd watch what they did. We'd talk to them. We'd find out what worked, what didn't work, and then they shared wisdom with us. And that was so important, so important. And now, as we're a little older, it's time for us to do the same for younger women, younger people, younger men and women. Okay, teach them how to be self-controlled. Again, this is the same root of a word as it comes up in chapter 1, verse 8, chapter 2, verse 2, 2:6, 2:12. But the one in 2:2, with the older men, is a little different word. It can be translated self-control, but it's not the same word in the Greek. So temperate, sober, remember we talked about that a little bit, sober-minded, sensible, but here it's self-control. How do you teach somebody to be self-controlled? Okay, the older women are supposed to teach the younger women how to be self-controlled. How would you do that? Stop that. Just stop that. You're doing something wrong. Is that gonna work?
Explain what you found works, when things are going wrong, how you handle it. Where you go mentally, what you do, you count to 3,000, some number you pick. But just to give examples of how I try to deal with it, per se.
Okay.
Are they themselves showing restraint and discipline?
Say that again.
Are them themselves showing restraint and discipline?
Okay, by the example of their own life, right? That's one of the best ways that anybody can teach anything, is to just set a good example. In fact, Paul's going to tell Titus that's what's on his plate. Okay, you teach all these other people these things, but on your plate is you be a good example. So, if we could say one way to teach self-control to any of these groups is to model it, right? And let them know that it's something we all struggle with, but we try to help each other. They're to be pure, probably implies sexual purity related to the idea of holiness. And again, maybe it's a special problem on Crete, but immorality was everywhere, right? Remember in the Acts 15 conference when they were deciding what the Gentiles needed to do to become, they didn't have to keep the old law, they didn't have to be circumcised, keep kosher, but they did need to do these 4 things, and one of them was abstain from sexual immorality, because it was so rampant in the first century. So that's probably what he's talking about there. And then this section here where it says managers of the household, or the King James says keepers at home. The idea of being a manager is the root word is about guarding the house, protecting the house, protecting your household, domestic duties, right? And then the last one is kind, which is the same word as the word good, and depending on the context, it's either translated kind or good, but the idea of being agreeable and joyful and happy, it's all tied up in that word. So this is the section, I read some stuff about how to be a Titus 2 woman, because he also goes on to say that they should be submissive to their husbands. And these 2 things, the managers at home and submissive to their husbands, have been controversial, right? So what do you think is being taught here? What do you think Titus is asking the older women to teach the younger women? Because I can tell you right now, there's a lot of difference of opinion on what it means to stay at home. You know, some people interpret keepers of home, meaning that a woman should not have a job outside the home. And of course, we've talked in this class about other places in Ephesians that talk about wives being submissive to their husbands. That's kind of a hot topic. So what do you think he's telling the younger women, the older women, to teach the younger women about those 2 things?
My first thought, and this is from my super biased worldview point of view, because I'm a 21st century American, so just keep that in mind.
We'll keep that in mind.
You remember in First Timothy, and you kind of alluded to this, but it was talking about the people, specifically the women, who who weren't like doing anything, and they were just kind of like being idle and gossiping and being mean, and that was kind of all they were doing. And then those were the people that he was like, hey, get married and take care of your house so that you have something to do, and you're not just being bad, you know. And when I was reading this, I don't know if I just misinterpreted this, but I kind of read it the same, like almost a similar way, where it's like, well, first of all, obviously women didn't have the opportunity or whatever, but we know that there's women in the Bible that had job kind of stuff, like Lydia, who, yeah, so anyway. But like the idea being, you know, don't just sit around and do nothing so that you fall into sin, but like do something with your house or whatever.
Okay. Where do we go from there? What else would the older women be teaching the younger women? Now, it's a different culture. I don't think that women in the first century had a lot of opportunity to work outside the home. And it's just probably, it did happen, like you said, Lydia, but I don't know that they had a lot of opportunity to. And the households were very patriarchal, and the husband was in charge. And so, you know, people struggle with what does that look like in the church today? If this is a manual for how things are to be in the church, some people take these verses and they paint a picture of a woman that is very foreign to what a lot of people would think the role of a woman is today. I almost got to this point and said, you know, I'm not an older woman, so I don't need to be talking about what younger women do, so we're going to skip over this section. That was my first thought, but I guess we need to talk about it.
Well, I don't know. I kind of wonder if there's some part of this that kind of lays like what TJ said about Proverbs 31. Like, if we look at that, that's not the right analogy, but give me a second. So, like, if we look at that as a list, then we have this false perception of what is being said there.
Right. And
So,
almost an impossible perception.
Yeah, but what I'm saying about this is not that it's not a list. It is a list. But it's that sometimes we read those words
And because of the environment that we were raised, because of the way that our Sunday school teachers or our preachers or grandma and grandpa said it to us when we were growing up, we get this false impression of what the word domestic means. Now, again, potentially unbiased, you know, but, and maybe that's just me, like, when I read this, it doesn't strike me as like, oh, how oppressive, because that's me.
Well, if your concept is that you have the more traditional view that a woman shouldn't work outside the home, you know, whatever you want to characterize that view as, when you read keepers at home, managers at home, you'll say, see, that's what it means. Because you're kind of leaning that way already. But really, it's you know, whether she has a job outside the home or not, it still falls to women or the hub of the house, the managers, keep things going. Am I off base? Is that?
Well, they still have to have babies, and, I mean, there are certain jobs that women have to do, and they have to take care of those babies then. But I don't think that means that men shouldn't be there helping change some diapers too.
Yeah, but then from my dad's generation to my generation, a big shift in that regard. Because I don't think my dad ever changed a diaper. I mean, maybe he did, I just don't know about it, but he was a very traditional guy, and my mother's a very traditional woman. So I don't know exactly how this works out in our society today, but I don't think it's that traditional woman's role, stay at home, only, you know. Do you know why they didn't want to give women the vote? You want one of the main reasons? Because it wouldn't change anything, because their husbands would tell them how to vote, right? So if the husbands are telling the wives how to vote, then it doesn't matter, it would all cancel out. And that was their idea, that the husband would tell the wife what she's supposed to do. So I don't think that's what anything that the Bible has ever said had to be that way. I don't know. I struggle with this myself because I don't know exactly how it works out. But I do know there's some basic things that an older woman needs to teach the younger women. Any other comments on that? I know we're running out of time. We always do. It's important to hit this last note. Reason why older women are to teach younger women these things, so the Word of God is not dishonored or spoken ill about. So if you're in a society and the women in the church are out of control, they're having sexual morality problems, they're not taking care of their kids, they're not even care what their husbands say, those women are going to give the Word of God, the church, if you will, a bad name. That's what Titus is saying is the bottom line. And that is not just women, it's the men too. If you're not the person you need to be, you're going to cause somebody to look at you and say, well, that's what the people of that church are like, I don't want any part of it. So we need to be the kind of people that don't let our behavior cause the Word of God to be dishonored. And in the section on slaves that he goes to next, he's saying that, I talked about this earlier, adorning the gospel. There's why the slaves would behave a certain way, because they need to adorn the gospel, make it more attractive. So, the young men, very interesting. They're only told, Titus is told to teach the young men to be self-controlled, and that's it. I thought that's a short list after you saw the long list for the young women. The young men are just, you be self-controlled. But then, isn't that the root of all moral behavior? Self-control? That's why Titus hits it like 5 times in this short chapter, is because that's really a crucial value, a crucial quality that we need to have. And if you have that, then maybe these other things fall into line. And I probably think he's being a little easier on the guys than he is on the girls, I don't know. But you know how Paul was. I don't know why there's such a long list for the young women, but not for the young men. And Titus is told to set in a good example, having integrity, being sound in speech. Apparently there were those who were opposing Titus, or Paul was expecting opposition, because he says, those who oppose you won't have anything bad to say about you because you have such good behavior. And then he goes into bond servants and slaves, and I think we're out of time. So I'll let Glenn pick up in this point next week. Thanks for being here, and give me those cards back. I'll get them to the staff. Thank you for doing that.
I've been trying to tell everybody that. I've been saying it all that night. I did, but that's why people gotta be talking. They gotta realize it for themselves.
I resemble that remark.
I'm not gonna stop focusing.
Where to go? I'm the oldest person.
Oldest one, you can't get us out of that chair.
I think so.
I know. And to guard the house.
Short distance.
I just think that,
Yeah, what's this? You got License of Law.
I hate it. Right?
Oh, you think that's just that?
You're not ready to go.
Before we go.
No, okay, this is really funny. I don't
Six
advocate,
things,
but I
and the guys are over here.
hardly anybody else. So,
I think the women have more problems.
I don't know, maybe I was wearing a tight shirt that day or something, and I was like, I just feel like really gross today. And one of my coworkers, she's not, she's new, she's not now.
What did they just say? Sydney Taylor.
I was like,
I think it's elder.
I started laughing so hard. She's like, what? And I was like,
You know, that's the relative. Both of you,
No, and she went,
my son, I'm old.
but I was kept laughing, so I'm like, she literally doesn't even know me, she really doesn't know me. So I'm like laughing, and I'm like, girl, that's not even possible. And she was like, oh, I'm sorry. She thought that I was, she thought that I just like impersonal. And I was like, you know, I think I really did do something for somebody to assume that they knew how old I am. And the reason that I'm pregnant and don't feel good is not that I'm not pregnant. It's actually, the reason I can't be pregnant is because I'm.
Well, they would probably give you one if you wanted one.
I understand.
Never seen you.
Nah, I actually haven't.
Not only to hire people.
The world.
I said, hire young people.
Yeah, because it's all of it.
Grandchildren's.
You have like icing in your hair or something, by the way. Oh, it's from that top. Right in the middle of your face.
You think they do?
You probably, it's hardened already, so I think you're gonna have to go to the bathroom to get it off. I have had a week. I am tired. We had a 100th birthday party.
I think it was called Wildwood West or something. It was by Florence, Alabama. And it was like it's cool there.
My mom and dad lived in Florence for 30 years.
I really like it there. It's
I
like
went to high
such a
school there.
nice size. Let me see if I can find it.
I really miss that there's nothing from None?
Yeah. I mean, there's middle
have to
middle
drive.
bottom.
You have to drive away. Ben?
Yes, the pictures,
I can't get over Big Ben.
the
I just-
star picture.
Yeah, that was crazy.